Yeah, like it's Yoga Man though. We like to see Yogi Man.
Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we'll discuss tapping the fourth dimension, the realm of bliss. With our speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti Yogi, author, and former monk. There are around 10 members on Zoom and around 15 members on Facebook. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Well, thank you so much, JM. Great to see you. Nice to see Mukaravinda, Mayank, JM. Is that your robot? Subhadra. Kennedy's here. Raj. Manu. Always here. Jay. Glad to have you, Jay. Ilya. Thanks for coming. Yes. Talking today about tapping the fourth dimension, and we think about tapping, oftentimes we think about tapping into something, and sometimes if it's a valuable substance that we can tap into, then we can enrich our lives. There'll be a gush of some substance that comes into our life. In fact, that kind of substance that comes into our life that improves our health or our outlook on life is something everyone's looking for, isn't it? Because there's a way in which people sell all kinds of tonics. Can anybody think of a tonic that people sell? And I guess it depends on your outlook. Some people drink alcohol thinking that it would be something that would improve their outlook on life, and maybe it does for a few minutes, although it does tend to make one foolish. And then there are other kinds of concoctions that people put together and blend, and they drink those. There are trees that you can tap into and get something sweet out of. I'm just analyzing the idea of tapping into something. And sometimes people tap phones so they can listen in on a conversation somewhere and get more information than they're due. Tapping, it's kind of an intriguing concept to me. There is a way in which yoga is about tapping. It means that we're in a place where we can, from our vantage point, find a route to a higher realm. And today I'll especially talk about how realms, a realm in itself, let me give you the definition. And if you can write the definition without looking it up before I announce it, then I don't know, you'll win something. We'll figure out something for you. Realm. Ooh, it says here a kingdom or a field of domain of activity or interest. And it comes from Old French, something that means royal. So in one sense, a realm is a domain of activity or interest. And according to the ancient wisdom literatures, a realm is defined by its sound vibration. Every realm has a particular vibration, and it will resonate with us in a particular way. That's why the ancient wisdom literatures that I'm referring to again and again, you've heard me say that so many times, are called shruti, which means they're sound that you hear. And in fact, there's a concept called Shastra Chakshus, and I'll talk about Shastra in a minute. Actually, I'll talk about it right now. Shastra means literature, and let's just be really objective for a second, shall we? Literature, the written word is speech abstracted. When you speak, then you might then want to preserve what you just said. Some of you taking notes right now, like Kennedy, copious notes as usual. And then later on, you can reconstitute it. You take the same vibration that you heard, you have some symbols you write down, and then when you want to reproduce it later, you just take it out. So the Shruti, or these ancient literatures, are really a series of talks and mantras, codes that produce a sound vibration that connects us, allows us to tap in to a higher realm. So if there's a higher realm, there's a lower realm, right? So these are described in code language. Do you like code language, anybody? Did you ever have a decoder ring when you were a kid? That's the really old stuff. But there's a way in which there's a code for the various regions of this universe. And it starts off with Bur, Bhuva, Swa. Everyone say Bur, Bhur, Bhuva, Bhuva, and Swa is Svah. Om, Bur, Bhuva, Swa. This refers, and it's a common utterance in the ancient wisdom literatures, of different realms of consciousness within this universe. And then there's a description of how there's a demarcation around this universe. It's something I always wondered about as a kid. My brother Tom and I, who were closest in age, there are 4 kids in my family. My eldest sister and eldest brother, 12 years older at least than I was. That's a long gap. And then my other brother's 2.5 years. Still good friends. We used to fight when we were kids, but nowadays, or since we were in our teens, we've been friends. So we would sometimes sleep outside. That was a coveted thing to do. Can we sleep outside? And we go in the back lawn and lie back in our sleeping bags, and we look at the night sky before we fall asleep. And we'd ask each other, what do you think is up there? Like, how far does it go? And is there a point at which it ends? And there's maybe a door that you can open. I had fancied a door there at the very top. In fact, when I sketch it out, not that I'm a great sketcher, but I did like to scribble, and I conceive it as a blue door at the top of the universe. You'd open it, and then you could enter another realm. I mean, doorways are famous anyway. They're called in Sanskrit a dwar. It's a gateway to somewhere else. And you open the door, and then you're in a different place. And so, I was wondering, is there an end to it all? And then can we cross over into another realm? Is there a different kind of sound vibration out there? So according to the ancient wisdom literatures that really talk about cosmography and cosmology, and there are ways in which it describes how each universe is a contained unit. I mean, there is a perimeter, and that there are many universes clustered together. And in one description, it asks us to imagine a huge sack full of mustard seeds. Does anybody here use mustard seeds? Yeah. They're so tiny, right? And one little pinch, and you've got like 50 of them. So a big bag of, I've seen these in spice markets in the Far East and Thailand, China, India, spice market, and that huge bag of spices. And if you imagine a huge bag of mustard seeds, and then there's each one of those would be a universe, according to the ancient wisdom literatures. So one universe is then, according to our vision, it's unlimitedly large. And my teacher used to give this example of how our perceptual horizon may be limited when we think about these things. And he told the story of a professor who was a frog. So it was Professor Frog, Dr. Frog. And he lived in a well that was rather large compared to other wells in the field, and it was 6 feet wide. And one day, one of the Dr. Frog's kids ventured away from the well, and he happened to catch a ride on the back of an antelope. And the antelope went down towards the shore of the ocean, which the frog had never seen or heard of before. And riding on the back of the antelope, he was able to look out and see the ocean. And I don't know if any of you take time to see the ocean. If you're in California, where I live, you can drive rather quickly. You can get over there quickly, that is. And as soon as I get to the top of the ridge and I look out, I feel a different sense of myself and the world, because it's the ocean is so all-encompassing. It kind of gives you a sense of proportion of how big we are in our lives. So that little frog saw that, and his life was changed. His little frog brain was blown. And when he came back, the antelope happened to take the same trail back because he lived nearby. And the little frog jumped off, and he told his father that, I've seen a well that's infinitely larger than ours. And Dr. Frog said, how much bigger is it? Twice as big? And the little frog said, no, much bigger than twice. And he said, okay, 10 times as big. And the little frog said, way bigger than that. And at this point, Dr. Frog became indignant and said, that's impossible. Our well is the biggest well in the field, and there is no such thing as a well that's bigger than 10 times ours. And in this way, his perceptual horizon was challenged. So there's a way in which the ancient wisdom literatures challenge our sense of the end of the universe. The universe, although from one perspective is tiny, from our perspective, it's practically unlimited. But there is a way in which, beyond what is called the material realm, the realm of material sound, struck sound, there is a crossover point at which one enters into what's called the paravyom. Vyom just means a sky or an area or a realm, and para means a higher realm. So we can cross over. But how? You can't do it with a spaceship, for sure. So by the time you got there, you'd be thousands of years old. And so there is a way in which the same sound vibration from that higher realm, and this is the idea of Shruti and the mantras of the Vedas, that the sound from that paravyom, the higher realm, is imported to this realm. So how do we, sitting in, where is everybody now? Let's give a shout out for your hometown.
Fremont.
Okay, Fremont. If you're in Fremont.
Jacksonville, Florida.
Jackson, Minnesota? Phoenix.
Jacksonville, Florida.
Jacksonville, Florida. Let's hear it for Jacksonville, Florida. I like this.
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Yes.
Wow. There's a lot of realms here. And who
we have
else?
on the Zoom chat, we have Santa Cruz, Phoenix, San Jose,
Boston,
Boston,
Folsom,
so yeah.
Portland, Sacramento. Now this is what I call fun. Okay, very nice. And from whatever realm you're in now, say the ancient Vedas, you can tap into the higher dimension. So there are several dimensions here that we're aware of in this world, and there are many that we're unaware of, even in this realm. What we call, I'll make distinction between the material realm and the spiritual realm. How's that sound? And the spiritual realm is superior, a superior and an inferior realm. Passing any judgment, it's just the way it's stated in the ancient wisdom literature. The reason they call inferior energy is because it's dull. The matter that makes up our bodies is dull, whereas the energy that makes up us, who we are conscious beings, is categorically different, and it's bright, full of light. I guess a bright thing would be full of light, and it's non-perishable. It's good to know you're non-perishable, right? Because everything else about our lives and the things that we have, including this body, are perishable. So there's a non-perishable realm. And even in this material realm, there is a series of realms we're not aware of, even within sound vibration. Now, another story from my childhood. I remember when my mother introduced my brother Tom and me to a dog whistle. Nowadays, it's used as a metaphor more than I think people blow dog whistles. But there's the way that we were dumbfounded when we picked up the whistle and we blew on it. We couldn't hear any sound. And we said, this is a whistle in name only, because a real whistle would make a shrill sound. And my mother said, because she had a broader, a deeper perceptual horizon, because she had knowledge. And she said, well, there is a shrill sound coming from this whistle, but you can't hear it. And we thought, that is the most utter nonsense. We were like Dr. Frog. There's no sound coming from this because we can't hear it. And my mother said, well, you test it out. Next time you go walking through the neighborhood when there's some dogs, and you blow it and see what they think about it. And we did just that. My brother Tom and I walked through Lafayette Valley Estates in Lafayette, and we'd walk through and we'd blow the whistle, and the dogs would, who said that? Where'd that come from? And they'd start barking. And we could see from the cause and effect that there was sound coming from that. It's just that we couldn't hear it. And we know when we're talking to a friend that our friend has a mind, right? I mean, we conceive of, we're talking, there's a mind, there's an intelligence, but can you see the person's intelligence? You can see the result of it. They're discriminating, hopefully, and they think, but you can't see the mind. Even if you used modern instruments, you won't be able to see it. You can see some of the effects of the mind working, perhaps, in the environment that it works in when it stimulates part of the brain. And there's not a way in which, with our perceptual horizon, that we can see the mind or the intelligence or even the ego. But we know there's a sense of self. We know that we're there. Just making a very simple point, but it can be overlooked very easily because we get so used to thinking that our way of seeing the world is the ultimate way of seeing the world. But there are realms beyond our perceptual horizon in this world. Child looks out at the ocean and says, that's the end of the earth. The father said, no, it's not actually. There's realms beyond that. And the child said, no, I can see right there. It drops off. It's
Yeah.
finished. So there's a higher way of seeing. This is called Shastra Chakshus. So there are descriptions of the higher realms, but from the sound vibration that comes from a higher realm is it proves itself. It's self-effulgent. It's self-proving. So when we hear it, we can experience the thing itself. That's the nature of the sound that comes from the realm that's beyond the material realm. So when I say tapping into the fourth dimension, there's several dimensions that we're aware of in this world, but what about beyond this world? So if we experiment with that according to the technology, we call it spiritual technology. In fact, the kinds of ways in which the ancients from the Vedic culture used to have an internet system had to do with this way of performing these fire ceremonies and modern trigonometry and other forms of mathematics were useful to them. In fact, they invented many of these systems simply to very precisely put together these special fire pits in which they'd light a fire and they'd offer mantras. One of them, which is still available, I have that mantra. It's written down in one of my books. That is described, if you look at it in today's terms, as a way of turning on the internet and connecting to a higher realm. So there is a kind of technology that's before the grosser type of technology, the machine types of technology, electronic ways of connecting and so forth. But I must admit, even now, I'm unaware of how a cell phone works, really. I mean, I suppose I could look it up, but even if I did, it would be slightly ineffable because, what is it that's transferring even television, these images that come through a wire or through the air even. I remember my father when I was growing up and, I was much younger than my father, as one might be, but I was the youngest in the family, so I was 40 years younger than my father. And when the computer age came in, when was that? Would you say 1986? I remember working on a typewriter and then suddenly word processors were a big thing. And then it was a personal computer. I had one of the Mac SE30s. In fact, I just got rid of it recently. I hope it wasn't worth something. And in any case, I remember my father, he used to ask me because he didn't catch that wave of technology. My mother did. She was like, I'm going to get this. I'm not going to be left behind. My father said, forget it. And he was still working on a typewriter while my mother was in the other room using a Mac computer. So my point is that my father used to ask me when I'd say, it's on I'll send you an email. And he said, well, where is it? He'd ask, like, where's the message? Where did it come from? How is it transported and so forth? And frankly, I didn't take the time to look it up, so I really couldn't tell him. As much as that type of technology is astonishingly subtle and mysterious almost, there's a way in which the ancient Vedic technology of transmitting information from a higher realm to a lower realm was equally astonishing. And one might read accounts of mystics from past ages. And there are accounts even now on YouTube of yogis. And I've seen these. I took a class at San Francisco State University once in the psychology department. It was called psychosomatic optimization, if you can wrap your head around that for a minute. And it had a lot to do with the body-mind connection. And he talked in that class, did my professor, about many things, but one of them was about ancient yogis. And he showed videos of yogis being put in boxes for a week where there's no air, and they were able to survive. And then there were accounts of yogis who could do superhuman things. And this is a remnant of the ancient ages when people were in touch with technology that where they could be connected to higher realms. So actually, it's an ancient tradition. And over the years, the technology has been simplified because the lifestyle that was required in order to be tapped into the fourth dimension, the spiritual dimension, the paravyoma, spiritual realm beyond the material realm, it required a real transformation in one's lifestyle. Shall I describe it, or will you become squeamish if I talk about how people had to live? They had to wake up early in the morning. It was like, oh, I don't want to wake up early. What's early? Well, I would say late is sleeping in past the sunrise. In that culture, if you slept past the sunrise, you basically blew it. You missed your opportunity to tune in because, and very technically, the day, they were very precise about the times of the day when the internet, the spiritual internet connection would work the best. And they divide the day into muhurtas. Muhurta is an hour and 40 minutes. And they're, well, you figure it out, do the math, how many are in a day? And then there's a way in which the muhurta before the sunrise is an hour and 40 minutes before it comes up. That would be the special time that people would already be up. They'd already be bathed. They'd already be in clean cloth. They'd already be touching the earth, sitting in a posture where they could be focused and then tune in because they didn't want to miss it. That was the time when you really tune in. And there were ways in which kinds of meditation through at that time, especially, that you could tune into a higher realm. And of course, there wasn't a bombardment of distractions at that time as well. People deliberately lived more simply. Have any of you lived in a simple environment before? Okay, Kennedy, where was your simple environment? It looks like maybe you're there right now. You're living on a farm.
No, this is back home with my family, but back on the ranch, you'd get up before the sunrise, go milk the cows, go get ready for the day, go do your work for the day, come back, milk the cows, go to bed, do it again. It was really nice.
Any observations about living in a, does simple describe it? Or would you use another adjective?
Yeah, I think simple can be part of the description, but I don't think that anything can have just one descriptor and be satisfied. Because it was definitely hard work. It was physically demanding. Even getting up that early and then doing everything you needed to do. There were times we got back at 11 p.m., but would be waking up before the sunrise the next morning. And so, you know, it feels like I don't think I'll ever be able to understand what simple living was like in the era you're speaking about, because there was a lot more of a community involvement in making that happen. But to do it on your own with a small group of people who just want to make it happen and they have a vision and they have Krishna at the center of it, and to be able to be a part of that is really incredible. And there was a lot of simplicity in it. Nothing was overcomplicated. It was, you know, simple in the interactions we had between each other and interactions we had with the world. We knew it needed to be done and we got it done and we helped each other. There wasn't the complications of, I don't know where my next meal's coming from. I have to balance this and my job and this other thing. And no, someone got it done. It always managed to happen. You could focus on right now. You could get up in the morning and when you came back from the cows, someone would have made breakfast and, you know, Jamuna Mataji would be in the middle of a puja. And it was peaceful. But it was, you know, there was a lot of responsibility to make simple life happen.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. It takes a little work to become simple. Shankari, simple environments for 500.
So this was back in somewhere mid 80s to late 80s, I would say 87, 88. And I grew up in Kolkata, which was a city. And my father's side, they are in fruits export import business. And so the grapes come from Maharashtra state in India. And so every summer for 3 months, my father would be stationed in a place called Ugaon. It's a very small village near Nashik, close to Bombay. And so once he took us there, and the houses that we used to stay in, they never had toilets inside the house. Because that was the culture of the, and it was very shocking for us, just every morning. And of course, if there were no toilets, there were no televisions, nothing at all. And so we had to live in that kind of an environment. But for even not even for once did myself and my brother, we felt that we were missing our city life, because everything was going according to the way the sun would move. People would wake up early and they would do everything on time. Like by 6:30, 7 o'clock, the meals are done, and then they would come. The families would get together. They would just talk about what happened and what to do the next day and stuff like that. And so early to bed, early to rise was just so effortless in that environment. So that was very, and we really did not feel that we did not have TV or whatever. And it was kind of austerity to, use the restroom, which is outside the house. But I think we just got used to it, and it was fun. It was adventure for we city folks for a few days, but then we were, of course, happy coming back home. But yeah, I still remember that experience. I mean, it's not gone away from me. So.
Well, thank you very much, Shankari. And I especially noted your point about getting used to it. And there is a way in which we become conditioned by our style of life, and we can develop other lifestyles and so forth. And just to remind us what we're talking about, I'm talking about a way in which sometimes people voluntarily lived in more simple environments. I'm not talking about inconveniencing oneself to the point of distraction or living without the natural amenities, but there are simpler ways to live that can be without as many distractions as we might have now. And this, I'm connecting to the idea of tuning in to a higher dimension. And now we have Radhakripa.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight myself. I grew up in a village environment in northern part of India. No personal Almira, no specific, mine. I didn't own anything in that one. And in a small family of 5 siblings total, there was not any anxiety I felt ever since I was till college, because we didn't have much and we were happy with it. I didn't know even that I complained about not having anything. So it's very surprising fact that when I reflect back on the life, I mean, in the morning you wake up, you go to the field, you come back, go to the school, come back, find a little time in between to play before we go to the field, again come back. On the way back, you play a little bit if you could do it before sunset, and then eat and sleep. That's it. And I never felt like I'm lacking this TV, or we don't have any scooter at home, or the television, maybe few people may have at that time, or refrigerator even, for the sake of, having it. And we feel like, what is the need for a refrigerator? Because what we buy, we eat. So there's no need to keep and store for next day. You get fresh everything next day. So it's kind of a stark contrast in today's world, as we have made our life more complicated. So just thought to share what it was.
Yeah, it was taking me to the village. I was just in Japan, and going for early morning walks and late evening or early evening walks with a friend of mine. And one day we came across an elderly woman who was weeding a field, and there was a long line of weeds, and she must have been in her 80s, maybe older, but she looked healthy. She was squatting down in a position that nowadays most people would not be able to get into due to sitting in chairs so much. And we walked past her and we said good evening. And then when we came back the other way, she was still there an hour later. And looked very happy. And we were just commenting about how she was close to the earth. She had something valuable to do. And then she looked satisfied. No extra amenities needed. Yan Yan.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
So simple life. Oh, my camera wasn't on. Sorry. There. So, when I was growing up, I was in we don't have much. We have just one room that's both my mom's office and our bedroom. And our meals, we go to the canteen. And my mom works at a high school. So we go to the canteen, and then free time that we'll go in the hills or wherever, and to find technically they're just weeds, but it's edible. That's kind of supplements some or you get mushrooms or what have you that you find in the creek. So that's very simple. We really we don't we the only thing that we have was a radio. We didn't have TV, a alarm clock and a radio. That's that's it.
Thanks, Yan Yan. These are taking us to different lifestyles, just hearing about them. And my purpose here, again, is just to mention that there is a way in which one may have more focus on one's inner life. When I'm focused externally, there's a way in which I feel that I have to have every amenity for satisfying the senses, and too much is not enough. Whereas there's an old saying that a colleague of mine once coined, and I appreciate it very much, and that is, go within or go without. In the sense of when you're able to have an inner life or an experience of your inner world, and I'll say more about that in a minute, you'll be satisfied in any environment. Whereas when you don't have that, you go without that. And also simultaneously, the word means you're focused externally only, then you go without that satisfaction, that inner satisfaction. So now about the tapping part, because that's actually a very active idea. When you tap into a tree in Canada and you want to get some maple syrup, you have to use the kind of technology where you tap, tap, tap. And then right, JM, you're practically Canadian. You know about this, maple syrup in Canada. So what is it that the ancients used to tap into the higher reality? I talked about it a little bit. They had mantras. They lived a lifestyle where they would feel more in tune to the rhythms of the earth, what to speak of the universe, and that they were able to look inwardly. And there's a term for this in the Sanskrit language, swadhyaya, which means, swa means oneself, and yaya means to observe. So there's a way in which a life of self-observation. Sometimes I forget about who I am, and I just go on by habit. So one of the ways in which the yogis would tap in to an awareness of their higher self was to take advantage of the codes that were passed down in these ancient literatures, and they're written in the form of mantras. And so there were actual books of literature, and before the books were there were schools in which you would learn the mantras and then say them. In the modern age, it's been simplified, and there's still a process to do that. Some of the books have been very simplified because of the older ones, like the Sanskrit texts. They were very long and hard to learn unless you were in an environment where you were hearing them every day and practicing them. In fact, there was just a study done, not just, but within the last 10 years. It was called, it's there online if you want to look it up at some time. It's called the Sanskrit effect. And some researchers looked into the Sanskrit language and also these ancient mantras that the young people would learn as they were growing up as a way to tap into a higher dimension. And they found that even in modern times, young people, children who learn these mantras by sitting and hearing them, and young people pick things up very fast, it had a very beneficial effect on their minds. In fact, they claim in their very authorized or very well organized scientific type of environment report. That was a weird phrase, but in any case, it was an academic project, not something whimsical. And they found that there were great benefits to the human brain. So let's see, MRI scans show that memorizing ancient mantras increases the size brain regions associated with cognitive function. The Sanskrit effect, which is the study that was done, thank you, Kennedy, refers to the cognitive benefits associated with learning Sanskrit. So there it is. So then, because and there's something prescient about the teachings, the ancient teachings. In fact, one of the books written 5,000 years ago called the Srimad Bhagavatam predicts that thousands of years later, like now in our age, people would be really distracted. So it would be hard for them to live a simpler lifestyle. And they're not used to that. And they would also be busy. I think they predicted the cell phone, which would be unlimitedly distracting, even addicting one to distraction and so forth. So there are these sages recounted, the story of the sages recounted at a forest, and they're having this seminar about how to do good for people 5,000 years hence. And they're saying, how would they be able to tap into the fourth dimension? So the sages there, they ask the esteemed teacher, they say, give us the simplest of processes, because in the age that is coming up, people are going to be so distracted, it'll be very difficult for them to take advantage. So they wanted to know, what are the most essential parts of it? So those, from that conversation that took place in that forest, many of the most essential parts of the teachings of these ancient literatures, including the mantras, were consolidated into a few books. And the ones that are most prevalent, although there's still thousands and thousands of them, are called, one of us is called the Bhagavad Gita, which is recognized as a universal literature. It's a non-sectarian spiritual writing. It's not designated to any religion. It's the wisdom literature that teaches the difference in energies in this world. And it also points to the fact that we're not part of the world. We're conscious energy is different from the material world and so forth. And then in the Bhagavad Gita, the speaker, Krishna, talks about the ways in which we can extricate ourselves from the lower realms and to enter into the higher realm, tapping into the fourth dimension. And one of the ways he talks about that is by performing a kind of yoga called bhakti. And one of the first parts of bhakti is to hear some of the mantras that come from this forest in Naimisharanya. And the claim is that if you hear the mantras that were spoken there, that's not it. It's the previous one. Still. I'll get to the mantra one, but it's got a book there. If you can't tell, that's a book. They were written down, recorded, the mantras. And if you hear from some of those books that have the essential mantras, then the claim is that just by hearing them regularly, it overwrites the noise within one's mind and heart, and it puts you on a wavelength where you can connect to the fourth dimension. You can go beyond your perception of this world, and by sound you can perceive the fourth dimension. And then as an example, in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a description of the way one feels when one breaks through, when one taps through from this dimension to the higher dimension. And so that's described in a verse that says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nashochati Nakankshati Samak Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. I'll translate it. So it says that higher realm, the fourth dimension, when you first touch it, you know how when the sun's coming up in the morning and you know the sun's coming up, can you see a little light? You haven't seen the sun globe yet, but you've seen the sunlight from the sunrise? Please say yes, because that means you slept in and you missed it all your whole life if you don't say yes. So yeah, so that this is described in the verse I just gave as the very beginning, the first glimpse you have of the fourth dimension. So when it says Brahma Bhuta means you're starting to see or feel or experience what's in the fourth dimension. It's very different from the three dimensions of this world that we're used to. And the first symptom that we exhibit when we're touching that realm, when we're seeing that light at first, is called prasannatma. Can somebody write it in the chat? Prasannatma. It's got two ends. That's why I hold on to the ends there. Prasannatma. So prasanna means happy, and atma means self. So you become a happy self. And why is that? It's because you're also from that higher dimension. And when you connect with it again, you naturally become happy. There's nothing in this world that can make us intrinsically happy. We get it, and then it becomes disappointing because it's grosser than we are. I mean, name any item. You can get what do you want? What's the best handbag you can get nowadays? Is there one? I hate to be cliche and say Gucci. Don't make me do that. Give me another one, Birkin. I've never heard of it, so it must be good. Okay, Birkin. You get a Birkin handbag. What is it? $1,000, $5,000, more, $10,000, $1,000, $20,000 for a handbag. You get it, and then I don't know, how are you going to feel? Not prasanatma. You're not going to be fully satisfied. You might think, like, who's going to steal it? Do people think it's a fake? There could be any number of things that you think of when you get a Birkin handbag that's going to make you, there's going to be a delimiting factor on your happiness. It's just there for the idea of having it is good, but once you have it, it's like, okay, I'm going to need a new one. And plus there are other colors and I kind of wanted that other design and this isn't exactly it, and et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on. But prasanatma means you're instantly in touch with your own happiness, and you know you are. That's the first symptom of tapping into the fourth dimension. You suddenly feel happy. And I've said this before. I met the author. She came and spoke here. Unfortunately, I haven't read her book yet, but I love the title. She said it was called Happy for No Reason. Happy for no reason. And that sort of parallels this idea of prasanatma. You just naturally feel joyful when you touch that light from the fourth dimension. And that's the light is coming from the source, our source, which is our original conscious personal source. Kennedy said, you can't even use it if you want it to maintain its value. The culture around material things can be so strange. Yeah. Yeah. I was with somebody in Japan recently who's a jeweler, and I found out that he also deals in expensive watches. And he was showing me his watch that he said was worth $70,000. And he said, it's only because it has this particular name on it that it's worth that much. Yeah, that's the relative world of value and, possessions and so forth. It's called in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's called the world of names. So the fourth dimension is different. It's what we've actually resonate with our higher self. We're conscious, and the energy that comes from the fourth dimension is the conscious energy called Brahma Bhuta, the spiritual energy. So the first thing we'll feel is prasanatma. We naturally feel joyful. And then there's also a sense that like the body is from the past, it's reflecting our past, and the mind is in the future. Mind is always going for what's next, and we generally worry because what's going to happen? How am I going to protect myself, my body? And the body is a representation of what we've done in the past. It's a filling in of our desires from the last time. So we're caught between these two poles, what happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future. When do we ever get to be right now and experience the present moment? There's so much said about the present moment nowadays. So tapping into the fourth dimension means what it's called in the shochati nakangshati. There's no concern about the past or the future. You're only in the immediate now. That's the next sense. You're absorbed in what's happening at this very moment. That means you're aware of your eternality, the eternality of the self, that you're not dependent on the external environment of the material world. So there's a sense of just being. And then shochini nakangshati, you don't lament for anything and you don't hanker for anything. You don't need a Birkin bag, doesn't even interest you. And you're not worried about losing anything because you feel there's nothing to lose and there's nothing to attain. I already am something. And then samak sarveshu bhuteshu, there's a sense of non-enviousness. Oh boy, envy is a killer, isn't it? When you feel envious of other people, then you can't enjoy your life because no matter what you get, you think, oh, but somebody has more than I do, or they're better than I am, or something like that. It's a way of just being slowly cooked here in the material world by envy. So when you touch the fourth dimension through swadhyaya, inner observation, and also hearing from these literatures that are passed down from the forest of Naimisharanya, they're just hearing them. They gave the most essential out of thousands of them. They just gave a few. And if you hear those over and over again, it brings you into that realm. And then you don't feel envious of anybody. You don't envy other people's bodies, other animals' bodies. You don't think I should live, they shouldn't live. Or some people, they're superior, inferior, because you're seeing beyond just the external feature of living entities. And you're seeing we're all spiritual beings. We're just occupying different bodies. That's just the edge of it. That's just when you see the early light of the dawn coming in the spiritual realization of the fourth dimension. Imagine when you get into the full expansive experience of the fourth dimension. So how do you do that? First, swadhyaya. Take time to hear what the sages said at Naimisharanya. And then there's also the Bhagavad Gita, which interestingly the conversation took place in the middle of a battlefield. So they did that just so we couldn't make any excuse and say, hey, look, I'm too busy. It's like, hey, this took place on a battlefield. Who could be busier or more stressed than a soldier about to go into a battle? And they were able to do it from there. That means we can do it from anywhere. And then the next one is mantra meditation. So a mantra, this process has also been simplified. And there are mantras which are omnibus mantras. And the one that is given through the Kalisantarana Upanishad, which is an ancient literature that recommends, there's a mantra that says 16 words, 32 syllables. That's like a medium-sized mantra, right? 16 words, 32 syllables, but it's only got 3 words. Hare Krishna Rama. And if you repeat that, the mantra, that has everything. So it's a one-stop shopping for mantras. You don't need all the other mantras if you have one. And if you practice repeating the mantra and listening to it, then the claim is everything's in there. And that's the way that you can tap into the fourth dimension. The heavy lifting on that is that, first of all, you have to do it. You can't just think, oh, maybe I'll do it. You actually have to experience it for yourself. And the second is that you have to really pay attention when you do it. Don't get distracted. Listen to the mantra, repeat it, and let it go in your ears. And just keep doing it until your mind becomes one. So here's the mantra, here's your mind, and it goes like this. They become one thing. Does that make sense? Have you ever been absorbed in something so much that you forgot who you were or where you were? What was it, JM? You put your thumb up.
I think primarily while doing things which make you happy, like service or trying to please somebody or trying to do a few things for them, then you don't know, or even mantra meditation actually, like when you're in kirtan, it just passes by. So yeah, there's several of
Oh,
them.
yeah. I'm trying to think of mundane examples. And I've said this one before, but I remember this so much from my childhood. My parents used to take me to theater all the time. And there was one in Berkeley called the Berkeley Repertory Theater. I think it's still there. And there was a play called The Duchess of Malfi. And I remember watching that play, and I was so absorbed, I forgot that I had a worldly identity. In fact, there's an ancient science by Bharat Muni talking about theater and the arts and how it takes you out of your body. It's a type of absorption where you forget yourself. You actually transcend, and if temporarily. And so the mantra is meant to do that also. When you do the mantra and you allow yourself the luxury of no distractions and entering in the mantra, your mind is here, the mantra's here, and you do this. You practice until they become one thing. Then when I was watching Duchess of Malfi, when the lights came back on, I was like, oh, I forgot who I was. And when you're doing the mantra, of course, you don't forget who you are. You enter more deeply into who you are, but you tap into the fourth dimension. Let me see, I forget all the places we went to. Sacramento, from Portland, from Folsom, from Boston, from Mountain View, San Jose, Fremont, Phoenix, Santa Cruz. We had some other exotic ones on there. Oh, Costa Rica. From here, anyway, the fourth dimension, it's accessible. First is Swadhyaya, hearing from these conversations that took place in this sacred forest thousands of years ago. You hear the conversation, it's reconstituted through the language. And then you chant the mantra. If you do it before the sun comes up, whoa, be careful. You may never come back. And then the third one is something that JM just mentioned about service. This is an amazing fact that you can lose your sense of ego and actually enter into the fourth dimension by service. I don't know what these people are doing down here. I guess they're giving some kind of shot. That could be controversial. But anyway, there's a way in which through service, through losing yourself, sense of your own needs, that means, and the temporal world, and especially service to our original conscious divine source, the Vedas say. When you direct your service that way, it's like watering the root of a tree. You satisfy yourself and everybody else. And that kind of absorption in service, and it can be apparently commonplace types of activities that you're doing, but if you're offering it up to the Supreme, amazingly, this is one of the ways in which you tap into the fourth dimension. And you can feel yourself, although you're in this world, although you're moving in the world, no longer are you burdened by the constant anxiety that I'm my body and I'm going to lose something. You lose yourself in this divine service. That's called bhakti yoga. So those are the three ways that the ancients offered us in the present age to tap into the fourth dimension. And you can do it from anywhere at any time. You just have to arrange yourself so that you can take advantage of these three portals. I don't know if that matches with a tapping, a portal and tapping, but it would be some implement, if you're tapping into a maple tree for the what is that stuff called? Maple syrup. These are like that. They're a tool, instrument through which you actually tap in beyond this universe, beyond our perceptual horizon, and we connect with that fourth dimension. And the first thing you'll feel when you practice this is the joy of being alive and knowing that you're maintained and that you're not going to die. And you also feel that whatever happened in the past, there is no future. I'm here right now and I exist. I don't need anything because I'm complete in myself, connected to to my original conscious source. And then a miracle can happen, which is you don't become envious of others. That's a miracle. Nobody can overcome that in this world without tapping the fourth dimension. Everyone has some sense of envy. And when you lose that, then you're free. You're free to appreciate everybody. You're free to actually be happy about other people, and you feel compassion. If somebody's having a hard time, you feel bad about it. When somebody does something good, then you feel happy for them. What a joyful inner life that is. So there it is. I ran us all the way up to the 1 minute mark, to the 1 o'clock mark. And I thank you very much for giving your kind attention today. It's been such a nourishing experience for me to have all of you smiling back here and giving emojis and participating in so many ways. Wolf's back. That's a big thing. I've been missing you, Wolf. Great to see you again. I should mention everybody's name, but it'll take us way over. But I can see your names. I'm really feeling fortunate to have had the time with you. And I hope the rest of your day is, there's some thoughts here you can take with you. And if you want to know more about it, how to do the mantra meditation, how to do swadhyaya or self-service that's aligned with our original. I learned this in Japan because I was giving a lecture in Okinawa, and I kept talking about OCS, original conscious source. And one of the young women from Japan, the next time I saw her in Tokyo, she had this thing, original conscious source. I hope that you can feel a way to tap in. Just get in touch with JM, because you see all those books behind him. He's been there since early this morning reading them, sitting there. I don't know if he ever leaves that seat. He chants there. And he and his wife have a whole system there for a mantra lounge that they hold open houses on Fridays, usually, that you can connect to, and a whole system they have to help people who want to try this. Well, that brings us way past the time. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Let's say goodbye like the yogis in the peaks of the Himalayas who come out of their caves. They have this saying, Hari Bol. It's to wish everyone well in your spiritual practice. You ready? It's also a code word. Anywhere you go in the world, if you say Hari Bol to a yogi, even if they're undercover, they'll open the door for you. 1, 2, 3, Hari Bol.
Haribol!
Everybody, see you soon.